Hello gobs and welcome back to another video. Today we have some more RPG horror stories. As a disclaimer, as always, these may or may not be real, but even if they aren't, they're a fun hypothetical situation to put oneself into and give advice on. Our first story comes from the user World Gone Away. Swords, or how to cheat at your own game. TLDR, the other major DM at my LGS came up with a fun live-action battle game, and he kept changing the rules to benefit himself. This is not necessarily a story about a tabletop game. That's okay. All horror stories RPG-wise are welcomed. That includes you guys. If you have your own stories, post them down in the comments below, or if you want to remain anonymous, you can go ahead and email me at the email in the description down below. Continuing on with the story, the guy in the story, let's call him Mickey, was the DM. With the largest group, I was second in our LGS, and he had a really cool idea for handling combat mechanics of Larping. He built a variety of Bofors swords and other weapons out of a combination of duct tape, PVC, hockey stick tape, and water pipe insulation. Some of the weapon designs were quite interesting. The rules were usually that it was a free-for-all deathmatch. One hit in the torso killed you, and you had to sit out the rest of the round out. If you were hit in the arm or leg, you had to pretend that appendage didn't work, limping, or just not using the affected arm. Some of the rules made practical sense. For example, head hits don't count to discourage striking at the head for safety reasons. Doing this on purpose was a quick way to get banned. But the really messed up thing was just about how darn arbitrary some of the other rules were. For example, if you were hit in the hand or foot, that hit didn't count. But if someone dropped a sword and you stepped on it, you lost that leg. I remember asking Mickey why he ruled it that way. He never gave me an answer that satisfied me. There's also strange rules for some weapon. For example, there was a really long and heavy spear that he said if you only had one arm, you could only use it defensively? What the heck does that mean? In practice, it was whatever was to Mickey's benefit. If he had the spear and he had one hand, he swung the spear up and contacted someone with it, he would rule that it counted because he was defending himself. Whenever I did the same thing, he said I was using it offensively and the hit didn't count. Literally the exact same situation. He allowed people to dual wield weapons, but he was particular on which ones you were allowed to do. And sometimes that really didn't make sense. For example, you could dual wield a long sword and a short sword, but not two short swords. There was an axe that was super heavy and nobody liked even using, but he allowed you to dual wield it with any other weapon, including a short spear, until a particularly strong player absolutely smoked him with the combination in one round. After that, the guy ended up winning. Mickey banned anyone from dual wielding the short spear with anything, and one round after that he banned the axe altogether. Wow, what a little what's the weasel? What a little weasel. Rules for D, but not for me. I don't LARP, but I have seen it at like Renfest, and my other friends have LARPed before. It seems kind of fun if I wasn't a fat, heavy goblin. But so far, yeah, just adding these rules in at the moment's notice. You don't need me to tell you that's awful. You can obviously tell this guy's a freaking douchebag. Let's move on. On the other hand, rules that made practical sense was lightest touch only, and anybody striking with great force was supposed to be banned. But he used to strike with inhuman fury and always had some BS excuse for why it's okay when he doesn't. He also used to change the boundaries and Terrence's allowances in the middle of rounds to give himself an unfair advantage. Speaking of terrain, he had weird rules for high ground where you could not parry any attack made from an elevated position unless it was him for some reason. Yeah, that's really dumb. It's LARPing. It's just physical fighting. I get the rules for like striking at the head, but can't parry from a butt. If you're blocking the swing, you block the swing. There shouldn't be a rule against blocking attacks. Whatever. One of my favorite BS moments that actually got me into a heated argument with him was there was a parking barrier in the park we were playing in. He called it the balance beam. He had a rule if you wanted to hop on it, you had to challenge another player to single combat. The two of you would then square off against each other. Nobody could interfere or attack you, and if you accepted or issued a challenge and you fell off, you automatically died. The thing about it that peeved me off so much was that he bounced 2 players for attacking people on the beam from the ground, but he rushed up and struck me in the back while I was in the middle of one of these duels. He came up with a really lousy excuse about how I was too far back on the beam. As a result, the duel was invalidated and he was allowed to attack me. I was BS peeved off. I came unglued and then him and I had a heated argument for the better of 10 minutes. And then I dropped the spear, got in my car, and left. What was the obvious solution? Don't play with him. I ended up making a ton of both for swords, hammers, axes, and I came up with a completely different design for the spears that I prefer. I wrote a new rule set that was very similar to the basic rules, without any of the arbitrary BS, and then suddenly most of the people at the LGS wanted to play my version over Mickey's. Somebody else came up with a way for handling hit points and adapted it into live action versions of their D&D campaigns. We had a lot more fun playing without him, and it was excellent exercises. That does sound really fun, LARPing out your D&D campaign. I mean, a lot of work on the DM, but it sounds like a lot of fun. I mean, you could always set up like props and whatnot. I mean, I don't know, it sounds fun. I might just be a super gigantic nerd. This guy was right. He should have just, he did the right thing. He just left that situation and went and made his own thing. Same thing if you're in a campaign and the DM's DMing a certain way and you talk to them and they don't change it, well, go and run your own campaign. Nothing stopping you from that. I mean, you can always pick up a modular, change the stuff around, and then run it the way you want to run it. Oh no, it may not be a D&D or a tabletop role-playing horror story. I don't know what I said. I say RPG horror? I don't remember, but it still counts. It's LARPing. It's close enough. Whatever. Let's move on to our next story. Our next horror story comes from Berg for Mota. Power Trip DM? ? I'll be completely honest, I don't know if this counts as a horror story. To put it simply, I just saw too many red flags and I didn't bother to flop around and find out. I joined a D&D 5e server. It had a bit more than 10 players, but the DM said that we're all in the same universe, so it made sense to have us all together. I didn't have a problem with this since I wanted to find a decent table to play at. We're starting at level 1. I decided to make a wizard. DM alerted me that he cares about spell components. If I didn't have a material, the spell would fail/attack me. Fine by me. I made sure to only take spells without any difficult to get material components, and besides, I only had prepared spells that didn't need any material components. Hey poster, here's your first red flag. 10 players? He didn't care. But guys, 3 to 4 players is perfectly fine. You don't need to run so many players. You're gonna run out of space to include everybody in the story. It's not really a red flag. I mean, if you agreed to it, then good for you. I just think it's kind of a red flag seeing so many people in a game because you're bound to get left out a lot, especially if you're just joining. I think most people would gravitate towards their players that have been in there than rather a new person, but who knows, it's all case by case basis. And then caring about spell components, oh my god, nothing wrong with that. I don't think there's a bunch of 5e spells that even have spell components that you need to get. Most of the time, the materials don't even burn up. In older systems or other systems, it just says spell components and you just have to have the bag and a free hand to draw out of the spell component bag as part of the spellcasting action. Moving on. A Session 0 was made to introduce our characters to the other party that was also joining. I started with a ranger and a warlock. The ranger was a new player to D&D and RPGs in general and was starting to learn the rules. Some god teleported us to his plane and needed us to murder a guy who's messing with his plans in the mortal plane. The ranger was a bit suspicious of the god, especially since they didn't seem to have any good nature. His character started asking questions and eventually got annoyed by the ambiguous responses of the god. He made a provoking comment to the god and got immediately turned into a puddle of blood. Why does this god who can teleport people to the mortal plane and can turn people into piles of blood like it's nothing need a bunch of adventurers to go and murder a specific... Let's keep reading, maybe it's explained. Probably. A bit later in the session, I asked the DM in the general chat if the ranger was dead, to which the DM replied that he was poking at a god, and this is what they would do to him. I commented that it was a bit cruel, especially since the ranger was new and barely got to play with his character. A few people agreed, and one of the people that was there before I joined said something along the lines of, I'm glad I'm not the only one who died like that. In between that and the next session, the DM constantly joked about killing player characters, made a trophy room to all the players he killed, adding comments to each trophy insinuating that it was their fault for getting killed, and made a post to announce that he was planning on adding a sanity system. You start with a set amount and lose it when you experience traumatic stuff. Really? A trophy room to player characters getting killed? Yeah, definitely a red flag. So far, I think you're good on the red flags. I think there's a good amount already, and you haven't even, Poster hasn't even said anything about seeing red flags or what red flags they saw, so I think they're gonna be pretty valid by the end of the story. Also, the whole sanity system. I mean, there's a thing in the back of the DMG for it, but if you want a sanity system, go play Call of Cthulhu. That has a wonderfully built-in sanity system. Moving on, Session 1 started. This ranger had his character revived. Since sheets were private, I assumed he lost a bit of sanity. The party of now 6 walked into a tavern. Basically, the only immediate interest point, one of us asked the tavern lady, if we could help her with anything in exchange for a place to stay. She says there are some soldiers that cause trouble in the tavern. Since they weren't there when we entered, we decided to stay in the tavern and wait for these soldiers. 5 soldiers in full armor entered the tavern. Me and some of the relatively more experienced players of the party start to panic. TPK incoming, to which the DM says that this was simply the consequence of our actions. You know, accepting the one the DM offered. We tried to surprise attack them. DM ignores us, rolls initiative. One guard is first to attack. Now, one attack takes about half the HP of the Raging Barbarian. A few turns goes until it's my turn. Since all the guards were still together, I walk into the range to get all of them in a single burning hands. I walk closer to them, extend my hands, and whisper to myself, I hope this doesn't set the tavern on fire, as I cast Burning Hands. DM takes a moment to think before saying, the spell fails and you cast Burning Hands on yourself because you didn't meet the spell requirements. I honestly forgot the spell components to Burning Hands, so I half-heartedly said, but I have a spell focus, as I was looking up the spell components to Burning Hand, as he says, you whispered while casting a spell that requires voice. The book clearly says you can't whisper the voice component. A bit annoyed, I asked, do I need to say that I say the spell out loud every time I cast a spell with voice components? He didn't respond and went back to describing the spell, turning back to hit my character. I left the server immediately. Please be honest with me. Were there actually red flags, or did I just join the wrong type of game? Nope, you're completely justified. How you're portraying the DM perfectly shows that there is a lot of red flags. Again, this whole, they had session 0, so the red flags didn't show up then, they showed up later, and he left immediately. Good job. I don't say in a campaign or a session that you don't want to be a part of, especially if you're online. You just have the luxury of leaving. This applies to real life. If you are in a situation, an uncomfortable situation, can't talk your way out of it, you might as well just probably leave and then talk about it later if you're up for that. I think I said everything I needed to. There were some red flags, and luckily the poster caught it and left before having to sit through that probably terrible session. Remember, guys, knowing D&D is better than bad D&D. And that's the same true for all TTRPGs. No TTRPG is better than playing in a battle. Oh, I forgot to even answer the freaking question. Yeah, this DM was power tripping. He had an entire trophy room dedicated to players and bad actions that was their own consequences. Yeah, the DM was obviously power tripping. What a screw you, man. Why do you go ruin stuff for new players? Moving on. Our last story comes from Realistic Line 7534. When the party wanted more nuanced villain than your typical Dark Lord, and DM delivered, but the party is so mad and even want to join the BBG. Long. Violence warning. So the party my friend is DMing decided it was time for something new with the BBG. They were tired of the typical comical evil pale slendered wizards and wanted something more nuanced. DM listened to them and decided that in the current session, they would be fighting the mysterious mistress of the Eternal Light, who was once a noble advisor to the king, but for unknown reasons decided to go rogue. She has already slaughtered numerous villages and plans to commit genocide on more. The king's spy master hires the party to find and defeat her, so the party knows their enemy, or maybe not. Along the way, they meet a kind, beautiful, and brave sorceress named Solari, whose previous party was murdered by the mistress of the Eternal Light, MOEL. She wants to join the party to avenge her companions and help defeat the MOEL. The party accepts her offer and continues their journey. Solari says that she knows the location of the bandit camp hired by the MOEL. Strangely, the camp consists not only of bandits in rags, but also of heavily armored soldiers. The party doesn't suspect anything and starts to adore her because she is A, beautiful, resembling a fantasy version of Marilyn Monroe, and B, gratefully helpful in fights. However, throughout the journey, Solari starts showing hints that she might be hiding something. But the party thinks she has a right to keep her secrets. Only the monk suspects something, but at worst, he thinks she is Moel's daughter or a relative of some kind. Then comes the culmination. At some point, Solari reveals that she is in fact the mistress of the Eternal Light. To say the party was shocked is an understatement. Some were angry, some were stunned, and some couldn't believe what she said. She also reveals that she didn't slaughter bandits and no scamps, but rather the army of the king she previously served. She explained the king's court was a spreading corruption that poisoned the entire kingdom. Civil wars were not uncommon in the kingdom, and Solari realized that the aristocrats had to be purged, and the king must become an absolute monarch who couldn't be blackmailed or manipulated. This is your BBG. Where's the horror at? This sounds fantastic so far. There's got to be something. Where's the horror coming in? We gotta find it. This all sounds wonderful. They didn't want the regularly evil wizards, so instead they had an evil person who slaughtered and committed genocide, probably like evil wizards tend to do. Anyways, let's move on. Let's see what the horror is. But when the king heard of her idea, he was enraged, called her a mad witch, and banished her from the kingdom. Because of her flawless work as an advisor, the king didn't put her on the kill list. Even though she was banished, she couldn't leave the kingdom in danger from the court. She knew what to do and began killing the aristocrats to save the king from their influence. Some of them were the king's close and distant relatives. When she ravaged castles and villages, she called herself the mistress of the Eternal Light. After she explained this, their party was furious. They claimed to the DM that she couldn't be evil and that she just wanted to save the kingdom. That sometimes hard choices are necessary for the greater good. That she is too complex to be evil. Oh, and also, she's so hot! Some of them even wanted to join the BEG in her quest to save the kingdom from the aristocrat. To say the DM's eyes weren't twitching is an understatement. What's the horror? TLDR, the party wanted more nuanced BBG. The DM agreed and delivered. The king's spymaster hired them to defeat the mistress of the Eternal Light. Then the party met a beautiful sorceress named Solari and decided to travel with her, not knowing she was actually the BBG. When they found out and she explained her motivation, saving the kingdom, they were furious and insisted she couldn't be evil because she had a noble goal and because she was hot. Is the horror that the party is saying she can't be evil? They're angry because the BBG is more than just a typical villain that has actual motives about what they're doing? Is this even the horror? The party's just mad that the DM gave them a more nuanced villain? Is that... and that they couldn't, like, disagree with her or something? Where's the problem? What's the horrors that they're angry? That shouldn't be a problem. That's fantastic storytelling. Is the DM mad? Is that what's going on? The DM is angry that the party wants to join her, while the party's angry that she's not entirely evil, or saying she's not evil because of her goals, even though evil is really subjective. If the DM says she's evil, I would assume she's evil regardless of her goals. I mean, this should just be played out in the session 0 of the campaign, or, you know, it was a good twist, actually. So, what do you guys think? I'll let the comments decide on this one. I gave my little 2 bits about it. I can't really tell what the horror of this story is, but even if it's not horror, the party should just go along with it. The DM should just go along with it. The narrative's turning out really fantastic. Just play along with it, guys. It sounds awesome. Yeah, it's a good break from the system. It's not really like a true horror story. I mean, no one got S8 or anything. I mean, there was genocide, but come on, guys, who can't handle a little genocide? Well, that is all of our stories for today. Comment what story was your favorite, and I'll see you guys in the next RPG video or something. I don't know. Have a lot of a day.